gardeners, we are back. Lindsay here with the Mindful Living Movement. Today we are going to make a terrarium for succulents, or I don't know, a little succulent bowl, whatever you want to call it. I found this at a secondhand store and it was kind of just screaming to have succulents put in it. Also conveniently, a lot of my succulents are kind of outgrowing their existing pots, so I'm going to basically take some of those, harvest from some existing ones. Some of these guys that are getting kind of a little tall, I'm going to stick them in here. So I've got a whole bunch to work with, a bunch that I need to repot anyways. So I'll show you what this looks like. And you can really make succulent bowls out of pretty much anything. This is, you know, some sort of decorative whatever that you would put things in. I'm going to use as a base here for this, I'm going to use sand in the bottom because obviously there are no drain holes in this. You can put sand in the bottom, you can even put rocks in the bottom. Both work good just to give yourself a little bit of a barrier for water to sit in so the roots aren't sitting in water, because obviously you don't have any drainage, so you got to be a little bit careful with that. So I'm going to fill up, I think probably just this little bottom section here with sand, because that's a pretty decent amount, and then I'm probably going to put another maybe inch or so of soil and then add in the rest of my plants. And you can stick all sorts of funky decorative things in after you stick all your plants. I don't have too much at the moment. I have like a few mossy things, but today I'm mostly just going to focus on getting everything potted. The reason I'm going to choose sand today for the base of this is kind of just aesthetic. I like the looks of sort of the two different colors that are going to be happening in the sides. But in these kinds of containers, I tend to go with rocks in the bottom. And you can see this guy, look at the roots hanging out of this one, definitely needs to be repotted. So that's generally what I do. Either or works perfect. So let's get going. So there is my sand layer in the bottom. So there is my sand layer and then also my dirt layer. Now I just wanted to take a quick little note before I stick plants in it, is the soil that I've used in here, you kind of saw I just kind of custom mixed it up. The soil that's in it is like a very sort of humusy, fluffy, moisture retentive type of a soil. So I did add in several scoops of sand into the soil itself, because succulents they're desert plants, and so it's better to have something that the water is going to just drain right through quickly and not actually sort of hold and waterlog, because when the waterlogged soil, or the plants sit in the waterlogged soil, that's where you end up with root rot, or they end up taking up too much water and then the leaves, you know, they get too fat and they burst, and then you end up possibly killing your plant or at least losing a bunch of leaves. So that is something that I've done. I would say I maybe did like 30% sand, maybe almost 40% sand, and then 50% potting soil is sort of the ratio that I've used. But if you're not super comfortable with mixing up your own ratios of sand or cactusy type soils, just go and buy a bagged cactus soil. Super easy, and you don't have to think about it. That would be the way to go, especially if you're new to succulents or cactus. Just go and buy soil specifically called cactus soil ready-made for it. The reason that I didn't put any more sand or perlite or anything like this to add extra drainage, which normally like a cactus soil would be much more filled with drainage materials and less things that actually soak and hold water, is purely just because I know how I am as a gardener. This is mixed up for me and the way that I water my plants. I'm kind of bad for severe neglect of my succulents. I just kind of water them every once in a while, and then I really just leave them for long periods of time, and this kind of helps fill that hole. They sort of get a little bit more balance to their watering schedule, I find. It just seems to work a little bit better for me. Whereas straight up cactus soils, I just know that I don't go around and water my cactuses enough for that to be something that works for me. But if you are brand new to succulents or even houseplants in general, just go with a cactus soil for your succulents until you start to get the swing of things and you start to sort of understand, because they really are a plant that you can super neglect up to a point, but a lot of us we want to water them more than they need to be in a lot of cases. So I would recommend cactus soil if you're just unfamiliar with how succulents sort of behave, because it's very easy to kill them if you're not sure and you go with something like this. This is mixed up for me and my extreme neglect of my succulents. So a little side note there before we get to our planting. Before I start potting everything up, I just wanted to sort of share what plants I'm trying to use most of in this. So something that I've noticed is, depending on the type of succulent that you have, some have a little bit of a fatter leaf, they suck up, they hold a little bit more water, whereas others have a thinner leaf, meaning they hold less water. And I found that when I combine these two in the same, it means that these ones don't get enough water and these ones get too much water sometimes, because these hold water for longer, whereas these ones don't. So I'm going to try and group a whole bunch of like these sort of skinnier, thinner leaves, I guess is probably the better word to use, versus something that has a really, really sort of puffy, fat leaf. You can see these guys here, they're all puffed up right now because they did just get a pretty good watering. And if you overwater those ones especially, you'll see that they start to like yellow and rot and fall right off of the plant because they've just basically burst almost. So that's kind of what I'm going to do. Is I've got a bunch of these ones, and actually I've got a few different kinds of these ones. So here's kind of the few that I'm going to sprinkle around inside.
Quick pause. I want to invite you to something special that's coming up. I am guessing that you are watching this video because you're interested in filling your life and your house with more plants. Now I'm curious, maybe you are also interested in having those plants be something that you can eat. If that is the case, head to the link in the description and join the waitlist for my indoor growing course that's going to be launching very soon, where you'll get to learn to fill your house with not just plants, but things that actually can feed you too. So if that sounds interesting, I can't wait to join you in the fall once it officially kicks off, and I will let you get back to your regular scheduled programming.
So a couple of the ones I'm using are cuttings that I've just snipped right off of my existing, and then some are going to have an actual root ball on them. Both work awesome. Sometimes it's recommended to let the ends of these callus for a few days before you shove them in some dirt. I've never found that to be a problem at all. I've rarely ever lost one when I've just snipped it off and plunked it in some new dirt. So that's kind of what I'm going to be doing. I've already got one here that I have potted up. This one did have a root ball on it. It's a little bit tall, but that is okay. And these ones I've kind of given enough of a stem that when I plop it in there, it's going to have some room to start to put out some roots. Alright, so you can see Alright, so here's kind of where I am at for right now. So I've got some big ones in there, I've got some little guys. As you can see, most of them were just cuttings, and I just kind of snipped off any of the excess stems that I knew were going to be sort of too long to fit in the soil properly. And I also have gently broken off extra leaves because these guys are going to, most likely, I'm going to be able to propagate these and turn them into more succulents. So I wanted to get them out of the way because most of the time they break off in the process of kind of poking them in there anyways. So from this point, I've got a couple little sort of holes over here. What I like to do is I'm going to sprinkle a few of the succulents just kind of in and around the dirt, because I find that these sort of bowl terrarium type things, they keep humidity a little bit better. As I mentioned, the soil I'm using is going to hold moisture just a teeny bit more. And this helps these things to kind of sprout their roots and start growing really easily. I find I have really good success just letting the cuttings sort of fall inside here and then growing that way. But what you could also do if you don't want to use cuttings, you can stick little rocks inside, moss, like you name it. Get kind of funky and decorative. I'm going just straight up plants for this one, and I might add maybe a little bit of moss that I have as well, some reindeer moss. But yeah, I'm gonna probably sprinkle a good solid amount of these cuttings in there first and then call it good. So here's a look at the finished bowl. So there's all the big ones, the actual plants, there's all the cuttings. Now, if you don't like, the aesthetic of all the little cuttings in there, you don't have to do that. Just put some whatever other decorative things that you want to. I'm going more for the functional. I find that I tend to be able to propagate really easily in here without a lot of extra effort from myself. So that is why I've chosen to go with that. All right, so that is it. How to make your own succulent bowl. As you saw, very simple. Just give yourself a good little layer of some sort of drainage on the bottom, then mix yourself up some cactus soil or just buy yourself some ready to go cactus soil. You can plant succulents with their little root balls straight in here, or you can plant succulents that you have snipped off of existing. And I've also sprinkled in some leaves that I have either broken off on purpose or by accident from my succulents as well to propagate from those guys. So just a quick little note too on if you are deciding to mix up your own cactus soil. The reason that cactus soil is sort of called that is it's very quick draining. There's not a lot of humusy materials that hold onto moisture. And so most cactus soils, quote unquote, are at least half of something that just is quick draining, so sand or perlite, and then the other half is like just a regular topsoil kind of thing. So as I didn't mix up any perlite here, I went with just sand and topsoil, and I went with about 40% sand, 60% topsoil, just so I had that teeny little bit extra moisture retention, and that is only because I know how I am for watering and things like that. I recommend, if you know that you're a heavy-handed waterer or you like to water your plants a lot, increase the things that are going to help it drain, so sand and perlite. The more of that, the more the water is just going to pass right through. If we think about cactus plants or succulents growing in the desert, they go long periods of time without moisture, but when they do get moisture, it's usually like one quick shot, and the plants are used to being able to uptake water really quickly, really fast before it just drains away. So if we kind of keep that in mind, it can give us an idea of how to keep them happy. But otherwise, I am going to give this a little bit of a watering, and I'm going to just sort of watch and make sure that I get it kind of evenly all the way around, but I don't want it to be, soaking wet so that there's tons of water sitting in the bottom here. So when you do water this, just kind of give it a little bit on the top, wait and see how it soaks through. Give it a little more, wait and see, and then once it eventually makes its way all the way through, you are going to be good to go. Wait for it to completely dry out, completely. If you stick your finger in the bottom and there's still moisture in there, don't give it more water. Go at least another week before it has dried out and giving it another, decent watering. And then you'll start to sort of get the hang of your schedule with watering and things like that. But I sometimes might even only water my succulents once every 3 weeks, maybe once every month, depending, which is not enough in some cases. But you got to go with what's working for you. So that's why I mixed it up the way that I have. Please let me know if you have any questions at all. Succulents are pretty forgiving in the sense that you can just snap their heads off and stick them in the soil, or their leaves, break them off, stick them in the soil, and a lot of times you're going to get a brand new plant. Very rarely do I ever lose a succulent by doing that. So go hard, have fun, and we will see you again next time, gardeners.